On the morning of January the 15th, 1947, Los Angeles resident Betty Bersinger was walking with her young daughter through Lima Park when she came upon an unexpected sight in a vacant lot on South Norton Avenue. There was what appeared to be a naked body, split into two halves. The scene was so shocking that Mrs. Bersinger immediately dismissed it as merely being a store mannequin that had been discarded. It wasn't until she neared that she made the gruesome realization she was looking at the body of a young woman who had been slain, drained of blood, cut in half and posed. Mrs. Bersinger ran away horrified and alerted the authorities. The police and the media group's eventual arrival initiated one of the most infamous criminal investigations in history. One which still remains a very disturbing dark mystery. Forever known as the case of the Black Dahlia. It wasn't long before the grisly discovery attracted an audience to pay witness to a scene that even hardened police officers shudder. Besides the fact that the young woman's body had been cut in two between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, it had also suffered extensive mutilation to the face, breasts and genitals. The injuries appeared to have been carried out post-mortem, and there were also signs that the woman had been tidied up with ligature restraints and sexually assaulted before her death. The autopsy concluded that she had been killed about 9 to 10 hours prior to her discovery, and the official cause of death was hemorrhage and shock due to a concussion to the brain and lacerations of the face. The killer must have wanted people to see his macabre work, so he displayed it as best as possible, taking great risk on being caught. There was not a single drop of blood at the scene, none on the body and not even on the ground. The murderer took the time to clean the corpse with gasoline and then pose it in a degrading position with the hands above the head and the legs spread wide open with the intestines gathered in a pile at the lower half of the body. The victim was left just a few feet away from the sidewalk. It was pretty obvious that the killer not only made no attempt to conceal his gruesome deed but actually wanted it to be discovered. Identifying the body proved to be quite easy for Los Angeles Police Department, having brought in the FBI to help with the investigation. They already had the victim's fingerprints on file. So, just 56 minutes after sending the fingerprints to Washington via primitive fax machine called a sound photo, the woman was identified as 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, who once applied for a clerk job at the Camp Cook Army Commissary in California. They even had a mugshot of her, as Short had been arrested once for underage drinking. Elizabeth was born on July 29, 1924 in Boston, Massachusetts, the third of 5 daughters of Cleo and Phoebe May Short. Initially her father had been a moderately successful businessman, who built miniature golf courses, but then the stock market crashed in 1929, and he lost almost all of his savings. The following year Cleo's car was found abandoned on the Charlestown Bridge in Boston, and everyone concluded he had committed suicide by jumping into the river. Left alone with 5 children to raise, Phoebe had to sell their house and move into a small apartment while working as a bookkeeper to support her family. Elizabeth was a sickly child who suffered from severe asthma attacks and bronchitis, needing lung surgery when she was just 15 years old. Elizabeth's life took an unexpected turn in 1942 when the family received a letter from her presumed to be deceased father, who, as it turned out, he did not commit suicide after all but decided to leave his family and start a new life in California. Now, years later, he finally had the courage to apologize. The idea of starting over in a new place appealed to Elizabeth, who had recently dropped out of high school. Indeed, she was also told by her doctors that it would be better if she spent winters somewhere with a milder climate to alleviate her respiratory problems. Therefore, when she turned 18, she left Massachusetts and joins her father in Viejo, California. This new relationship did not last long. Elizabeth and Cleo argued a lot. In 1943 she moved out once she found a job. She bounced between places for a while before relocating to Florida, where she met an Army Air Force officer named Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. Unfortunately, their romance was cut short by World War II. Gordon was deployed to the Indian theater of battle as a pilot, where a plane crash left him recovering from injuries. Gordon wrote to Elizabeth and proposed marriage. She accepted but never got to see her fiancé again, as Gordon died in another crash just a few weeks before the end of the war in 1946. Elizabeth decided that she needed another change of scenery, moving once again, this time to Los Angeles. There she found employment as a waitress while renting in a one-room apartment behind a nightclub. It was alleged that she occasionally resorted to prostitution to make ends meet. This may have something to do with her untimely end. However, this was never proven. It is also commonly asserted that she was an aspiring actress, but she had no acting credits to her name. The media had a field day with the case, as the entire country became enraptured with the murder of Elizabeth Short, promoting her in the tabloids as the Black Dahlia. The origins of the nickname is murky at best. Some say the newspapers came up with it, while others claimed it was something that friends called her. And again, some say the staff at the restaurant where she works called her that. Regardless, it stuck, as history has proved. Without a doubt, the most egregious and exploited example of journalism came courtesy of the Los Angeles Examiner, who stooped to new low to get the scoop on Elizabeth's early background after her body was identified. Reporters from the Examiner called up her mother before she learned that her daughter was the victim of a brutal murder. Instead, they told her that Elizabeth had won a beauty contest and they were looking for background info on her life. Only afterwards did her poor mother learn the horrible truth about what really happened. The last person to see Elizabeth alive was a 25-year-old salesman named Robert Red Manley, who she was dating at the time. The two had returned from a trip to San Diego on the 8th of January. Manley dropped her off in front of the Biltmore Hotel in Hollywood the following day. Robert was the first suspect and was picked up for questioning a few days after Elizabeth Short's body was found. Manley had previously been discharged from the Army and was described as mentally unstable following multiple nervous breakdowns. Fortunately for him, he had a solid alibi for the time of the murder. He agreed to take a lie detector test on 2 separate occasions. He passed both. Red Manley was in the clear. A few months into the investigation, the LAPD had around 75 suspects whom they considered good enough to scrutinize. By the time they went to a grand jury a couple of years later, they over 150 suspects, and yet the only arrests ever made in the case were for obstruction for false confessions. A sad story indeed. There were rumors of various people having been credited as being the murderer. Rumors spread as far as an assumption made that it was Elizabeth's father. However, that was all conjecture at best. Much time has gone now, and suspects and witnesses now dead, the Black Dahlia will remain one of the most intriguing and perhaps grisly murders in modern history. If not only for its macabre details,